Welcome to our first episode of Toolbox Tuesday, where you'll find out some interesting facts and some information that you might not already be aware of. Welcome back to another Tech Talk sort of video. Fuel prices at the moment, particularly here in Australia, are just going ridiculous. I know fuel prices in the US are crazy at the moment as well, so it's not uncommon to be browsing the forums or the Facebook pages or the Facebook groups, etc., browsing for cars or having those kind of car discussions, and people talk about fuel economy. Now, a little bit of a pet peeve of mine is people talk about fuel economy. I'm going to use Australian terminology, metric terminology, because for one, it actually makes sense. Everything here is metric, so kilometers, meters, liters, things like that, right? So fuel economy is measured in liters per 100 kilometers. So in other words, how many liters you used of fuel to travel 100 kilometers. And that's the industry standard. You'll see that on brand new cars, on the windscreen, on the windshield, on the stickers. And it'll give you an urban cycle, which is your city driving, your stop start, doing the school run, stuff like that. And then your extra urban or your highway cycle, which is typically above a certain constant speed, and that'll give you what you would expect to return on like long trips, constant highway or freeway speeds. So the difference between those two, you'll see the highway speed, your liters per 100 kilometers, the highway reading will always use less fuel than the urban or the city driving cycle, which is your stop start, heavy traffic type of driving. Of course it will, right? That's just common sense. But what frustrates me is when people talk about, they're selling their car or it's on a particular group, Facebook group or something like that, and they say, look, my car averages 20 liters per 100 Ks. And you think, oof, that's terrible. And then another person pipes up and says, oh, well, I've got the exact same car, but mine only uses 12 liters per 100 Ks. And you think, oh, okay, well, what's the difference? Well, I can tell you the difference, but there's also a piece of critical information missing. Average liters per 100 kilometers is absolutely tied to your average speed. So pretty much any car for the last 15, 20 years that has a trip meter to give you your average fuel economy will also have your average speed. In a lot of the cases, it's the very next, the very next statistic that you go through the cycle. So what you need to be saying is my average speed is 30 kilometers per hour and that I use 20 liters per 100 Ks. That would be a typical reading of like a city or an urban driving. So the lower your average speed, the more fuel you're going to use, because it's directly tied to each other. You're stop starting all the time, you're at traffic lights, you're in slow creeping moving traffic. You're not covering a lot of distance, but you're still cycling the AC, you're running the car, you're accelerating and then slowing down, accelerating and then slowing down. You're not cruising. On your highway cycle, you would expect to see that average speed 60, 65, 70 kilometers an hour. And therefore your average fuel economy for that average speed should be significantly lower. So for those of you out there, a takeaway, if you're talking about this on the forums or on the Facebook group pages or whatever, and you say, oh, my car gets around 10 litres per 100 Ks at an average speed of blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, just to put it into perspective, to give you a real world scenario, we've got a Ford Territory diesel. So it has a 2.7 litre V6 diesel from the Land Rover Discovery 3. It's an Australian built car. I don't expect everyone overseas to know about it. It's a 7-seat SUV. It's all-wheel drive. I think it weighs in at 2,300 kilograms. So it's not exactly a small car. And, you know, it does the job, does the school run, the groceries, all that sort of stuff. So it's fine for that purpose, but that's the main driving cycle that it gets. So it averages around 10.5 to 10.8 litres per 100 kilometres. And you think, well, hang on a sec, the actual book, the Ford book says that that car in its urban cycle should be at 8.8 or 8.9. We've never got it that low during the average urban cycle because it never sees over 60 kilometers an hour. It's always in built up areas. Our whole estate that we live in is 40 kilometers an hour. School run, 40 kilometers an hour. It's always stop start. It's always low speed. So you'd expect that fuel economy to be pretty awful. But we've done a trip up north Queensland, and on the highway, average speed was above, it was 70 or 73 kilometers an hour for an extended period of time. The average fuel economy was 7.1. So that's a huge difference from like nearly 7, let's just call it 7, to almost 11 just from a different style of driving. And that's with me driving it most times. It's not because I'm trying to race everyone off to set lights or anything like that. That's just how it turns out because of that whole stop-start driving and the actual cycle that it's using for that fuel economy reading. So I'd encourage you, every time you talk about fuel economy, tie it to your average speed. Like I said, that information is there on the dash, ready to go. It's literally the next setting, or go through the little menu and figure out what it is, because they're directly linked to each other. So I think it'll help everyone understand a little bit better, because it's almost as bad as going, oh, I get about 500 Ks to about half a tank. That's ridiculous. That means nothing, because half a tank on your needle could be 10, 15 litres either side. Like, honestly, it's ridiculous to think that a fuel gauge is that accurate. Even now, they're not that accurate. Use your trip computer. That's what it's there for. It measures all of that stuff and look, okay, it's probably as accurate as you're going to get from a readout. But having the fuel economy reading tie into your average speed is the best information you can put out there to give someone an accurate picture of the combined cycle. So with that, good luck and happy motoring.